Hello everybody. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I was riding and my phone ran out of battery, and you have to do Facebook Lives on your phone, and I've only got an incredibly old charger, so it takes about 45 minutes for it to get it juiced back up again. Anyway, if there is anybody here, it's lovely to see you. We're going to talk today about indicators of balance. And I'm going to talk about it specifically with regards to the ridden horse today. This is a particularly flattering angle, this, isn't it? Like pancake boobs. Thankfully, this isn't an OnlyFans video, so hopefully nobody here minds. So today I'm going to talk about indicators of balance when we are riding our horses, because there are quite a lot of conversations regarding balance. And, you know, you even hear it in the mainstream riding world. So we talk about it a lot in the classical world, but you will also hear mainstream riding instructors talk about riding your horses in balance. And the challenge can be working out what the dickens they mean. Because how do you know if your horse is out of balance? And how do you know if your horse is in balance? And there can be a lot of vague discussions around what this means. I saw a lesson a little while ago where someone was riding in a fairly traditional, okay, so you're going to drive the horse on from behind into a fixed hand, and there he goes, he's lifting his shoulders and now he's in balance. And what I could see was that nothing changed other than the fact that the horse brought his nose back towards his chest. So he looked in an outline that people find pleasing, I guess, but there were no other indicators that he had actually changed his balance. I have been exploring this a lot with Fuego in recent times, and I'll tell you a little story. I decided last year that Fuego was so challenged by schooling. I think most of you know I'm going to do a little write-up for him on the Leisure page tomorrow or day after, because I'm taking him as a project to see Sylvia. We've got an open place because there was a place available. She has very graciously welcomed us back. Because about a year ago, I just thought I'm going to stop schooling this horse. He's so out of balance. He's had something from the tip of his nose to the heel of his hind foot that's gone on. Every single bit of him is excluded from the insurance. He has flummoxed many vets with his amazing myriad of interesting physical quirks, including ethmoid hematomas in his skull, which then drained the wrong way and went back down through his gullet, and then he ended up with a wonky epiglottis that's caused quite a lot of issues. He had a skull fracture. He's got things wrong with his front feet. He damaged his back. He damaged his supraspinous ligament. He's got something wrong with one stifle. He's got something wrong with one hock. All manner of things. Gut problems. He's got EMS. What he has got in his favour is an extremely lovely horse. A very, very sweet-natured horse. Anyway, I had decided I'm going to stop schooling this horse. This is too challenging. I'm just going to hack him. And that's what I did. And so I just allowed him to go along on long reins. And he gradually looked worse and worse and worse. And the body workers I was using at the time were saying, this horse doesn't look great. He actually looks more crooked and more like a hammock. That's his tendency, is to look like a washing line, with a great big dip in his back, then very high withers, which he shouldn't really have, and then a dip in front of his neck, and then an upside down neck. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it? It's just as well he's got a very lovely crinkly mane. And he was looking more and more like that. And my foot trimmer was saying, something weird is going on with his feet. They're getting more wonky. So I had to come to the conclusion that riding Fuego on long reins, out hacking, while he might be perfectly fine with it in his mind, was not doing him any favours. And although you would say there were some indicators that he wasn't tense, so he was walking along with a wobbly underneck that some people are desperate to find, you know, wobbly brachiocephalic, relaxed, swinging back. He was out of balance. He was going along with a very low head and neck, dropping the base of his neck, dropping his thoracic sling and his middle, and he was out of balance. And doing this over the course of however many months I did that for, thinking that I was actually doing the right thing by that horse, was degrading his body. I also did a long period of time where I didn't ride him, and he got even worse, significantly worse. So what this told me was I have to see if I can find ways to help this horse move in a better balance if I'm going to ride him, and or even if I'm going to leave him out of the field. He's too young to start looking like a 35-year-old horse, which was what happened when I just turned him out. Is his whole body collapsed, basically. So he ended up looking like an ancient horse with feet that were really squiffy, because he didn't have the postural strength to carry himself in balance. And that was compounded by the fact that he's got all manner of interesting pathologies. So what were some of the symptoms that Fuego was out of balance? And these are not special to Fuego, they are common. Number one, he went way too fast in the walk. This is really common. Slamming along, neck really low, because I was riding him on kind of washing lines, thinking I'm just not going to trouble this horse anymore. So he was walking too fast. The rhythm was very quick. We were covering a lot of ground in walk, but the payoff for doing that was that he was running to the front end. Hang on 1 second. Zia, I'm doing a webinar. Sorry, do I say that in every single thing that I do on this membership? So he was going way too fast in walk, and that is really common. Many of us allow and potentially even like horses going very fast in walk. It's quite rare for a horse in walk to be able to manage that speed in walk and not be out of balance. So what I could hear him doing was doop, 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 really fast, and on his front end. And you could hear that because you could hear his hoof beats slamming along, particularly when he had hoof boots on. So those were my first two indicators that he was out of balance. Was that he was going too fast in walk. He was also going too fast in trot. That isn't always true for other horses. Some horses go too slow in trot rather, sorry. And his front feet sounded loud and heavy. The next indicator was that when I would ask him to raise his neck, because I was letting him go along on long reins, he would lift his head, but he would not lift his thoracic sling. So nothing would change other than he would lift his head. And you could see that when I took stills from some videos, that he was inverting his whole top line. So as I was saying to him, well, could you go along not with your nose on the floor? He was lifting his head, his ears were coming back towards me, but he wasn't changing anything else. So he was longer in his underline and shorter in his top line. And those of you who came to the Healthy Movement in Horses demo that Nikki Stevens and I did a couple of years ago heard us talking about that a lot. It's a really good indication of poor posture and also poor balance. If you take a snapshot of your horse, and if you compared the line that runs under their belly up to their chin to the line that runs from the top of their rump to the top of their ears, and the top line is shorter than the bottom line, you know that they are upside down, and in doing so, they are in a compromised postural position and they're out of balance. So that was another indicator. Further indicator was that very often in walk he would slightly pace. This is really common in Iberian horses and common in cobs. Those are the horses that tend to do that. So rather than having a 4-beat walk, he was pacing. Both legs on one side were going almost at the same time and the same on the other side. That would tell me that he was on his shoulders. So that was another thing that he was doing. And finally, and there are probably more, it always felt like his saddle was pitching down into the back of his withers. It always felt like I was having to arch my back to, which is my tendency anyway, that's my go-to. Yours might be something slightly different. To bring my shoulders back up because he was pitching me forwards. Because he was running to the shoulders. There are, I've missed a key indicator. Sorry, everybody. It's been a long day and I've got an allergy, which is why I have to keep rubbing my eyes all the time. He was leaning on the bit. That was another big one. Is when you did pick up the bit, not only did he just lift his head, he didn't change anything else in his body. He felt very heavy at the end of the reins. He was using my hands, or whoever it was that was riding him, to prop himself up. What Philippe Carl would talk about a fifth leg is that he's saying, oh, do you know what would be easier if you could carry my whole weight in your hands? So that also was telling me that he was out of balance to the shoulders. There were a few other symptoms that might show up differently in different horses. So for him, being out of balance in trot meant that he would go too fast, and the same in canter. Much too fast, like 1,000,000 miles an hour. In trot, it was like a sewing machine, and not leaning on the bit in trot, but upside down, really bracy. And then in canter, he was leaning on the bit and going around like a steam train. Some horses in trot and canter, when they're out of balance, they actually go slower. And so that slightly depends on the nature of your horse. He's the kind of a guy that is going to choose speed. He's more on the worried spectrum, and he uses speed as his go-to. So those were a few, and he would get worried. So almost invariably, if a horse is out of balance mentally, physically, they will be out of balance mentally. So in my desire to make life easier for Fuego, there you go, I'm going to stop messing with your body. Let's just hack. You just go on long reins, do what you like. I actually made things worse for him. I actually, by sitting on his back and adding to a horse who was already out of balance because of his myriad of interesting pathologies, he was getting worse. And there were some other things that would show up, and they'd show up out hacking and in the school. Not that I was really ever schooling, but say in the winter when the weather was terrible, sometimes I'd just go around the outside of the school to get some miles on the clock, because he is also a horse who puts on weight easily. Is that in canter, both out hacking and in that situation, he would change leads all the time. And I talked about this in the canter Facebook Live. For him, that was an indication that he was on the shoulders. So he was out of balance, and so flipping leads, basically. So those were a few of the, and most of those are pretty common indicators that he was not in. My thing's just trying to reconnect. So some of those might be familiar to you. Pulling on the bit, leaning on the reins, going too fast in the walk. And many of us who've come from a horsemanship background have told like that we should be going in this great big stomping walk. But actually for many horses, that creates a loss of balance because they're not strong enough to manage it. And so they just use momentum. Catherine's saying, sounds like someone I know. I know, it sounds like quite a few people I know. Hello, everybody. Connie was like that until I found Legerté. Time for the Pivo. Yeah, it was a really helpful one for me, Tracy. Is when I really started to look, I was like, oh, flipping Henry, okay, this is what's going on. And this horse is actually getting worse, and it is showing up in his body. And people who are not invested in him in the way that I am are telling me. My foot trimmer is telling me that his feet are becoming more out of balance and crooked. Body workers are telling me that his spine is getting more crooked, that he's more dropped in the middle. And my saddle fitter was also saying, I don't know what to do about this saddle, because the reason it's pitching down into the back of his shoulders is not because of the saddle, it's because of Fuego. So this is where I started. And we've still got a long way to go. And that's why I'm taking him to Sylvia, because I want her help with a few things. Downwards transitions are particularly tricky with Fuego, and that's where he will drop the base of his neck and jack his neck up to make the downwards transition. He finds that really hard, so I'm hoping she can help with that. But we just had a lovely canter on both reins and canter trot transitions on both reins without him running or panicking. But where we started, and that I couldn't do that before, because he was always worried about doing just what are simple transitions, really. Because he was worried about the loss of balance that was following the canter to the trot primarily. That was the big one for him, is I'm already out of balance in canter. Then you're going to make a request for me to make a downwards transition to trot. I'm going to hit the ground running. So I'm going to be even more out of balance. So that was a bad no-no for him. So Tracy's saying Connie's starting to sound really balanced. Yeah, lovely. So these were some of the first indicators that I used. So I decided to start prioritizing balance, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I thought I've been round all the straightening exercises, all the bending exercises, everything. But fundamentally, everything I do with this horse, he is out of balance. So when I got on him, every single step I checked out these things. Does it feel like I could stop his foot on the next footstep? Or does it feel like he's already set off and we're bowling away, which is what was happening before? So that was where I started. So to begin with, for the first few sessions, we would walk 2 or 3 steps and then have to stop, because I'd realise that and it's only taken me 8 years, however long it is I've owned Fuego, that within 3 or 4 strides, he was out of balance. He was running. Because his footsteps would start to get louder and the rhythm would start to get quicker. Those were my first indicators with him. The first 2 was, okay, we'd set off 1, 2, those are light. Oh, now doof, 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 doof. Okay, stop. Right, let's go again. So those are my first indicators. A really fundamental one with Fuego and this is easier to feel on some horses than others, and he was so extreme it was easy to feel, is what he was doing to my pelvis and the saddle. So if it felt like the saddle was level or ever so slightly lifting a little bit in the front, then that was a sign that he was going forwards in balance. If I set off and immediately it felt like he was pitching my pelvis down in front, and honestly, for years I'd be thinking, what is wrong with my lower legs on this horse? Why are they flapping around like tarpaulin on the side of him? And it was because of that. My pelvis was being pitched down in front and then my legs were flapping out inside. So that was the other thing that I used as an indicator. The moment I felt my pelvis being tipped down, I'd stop. Okay, let's stop, regroup. So Cheryl's saying, Eba could manage that just coming in from the field. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. When you start to clock it, Cheryl, I realised it was just going on all over the place, basically. And your horse is a better put together horse than Fuego. That's the other downside for Fuego. He's about 17 foot long. He's not a very compact horse at all. He's got a very long neck, very upright shoulder with a unfortunately set back The saddle is a long way back from where his girth groove is. I think I've mentioned this before. And just after I bought him, somebody more knowledgeable than I said, that's not going to be a very easy horse to sit on. And I was thinking, what are you talking about? And now I know what she meant, was that his conformation doesn't predispose him to being ridden very easily. What I've got in my favour is his lovely brain. Okay, Flynn's saying, oh my goodness, this is my horse. This is such a good info for me. Good, I'm pleased to hear that. So I thought about these things, was right. When we set off, the moment I feel like the rhythm is getting quicker, his footsteps are getting heavier, and I feel like I'm being pitched down in front, I'm going to stop. We're going to regroup. I would actually ask him to rebalance in halt, and then we'd go again. So that is what I did for some time. And I did use it alongside in walk lateral exercises that I knew would help him. And interestingly for Fuego, they are more the Travers and Half Pass family than they are the Shoulder In family. It is actually more beneficial for him to use those exercises to help him rebalance than Shoulder In. I'll maybe talk about that in another Facebook Live, but that was something that I discovered. The next thing I worked on, and it wasn't much fun for a couple of sessions, was I'm never going to agree for you to lean on the bit. It had become quite a habit, and I had unfairly let somebody else ride him without giving her proper tuition and without really noticing what was going on. And she's a very nice rider, and he had been pulling on her quite strongly, and I hadn't noticed that was what was happening. So he had really been dropping the base of his neck and pushing into the bit. So I went right back to, we never go forwards with you leaning on the bit. And that meant in trot and canter, we had some not very fun rides to start with, because he was so practiced at, when the speed goes up, push on the bit and go. And I was stopping him every time that it happens. And in canter, that wasn't much fun. I mean, he was so strong, he was pulling me out of the saddle. So what we worked on, and actually Sarah Widdicombe really helped me with this, is I had been in trot and canter trying to change his balance within the gait. So I had been doing things like neck rein turns in trot and canter to try and help him to rebalance. And it wasn't really changing his mind about that. So actually what I did was, the moment, we even did this before this, I was only going a few strides in each gait. So we'd go up into canter, 3 or 4 strides, back to trot. Make sure the trot was balanced, then go up into canter, 3 or 4 strides and back to trot. So he was thinking more about the rebalance of the downward transition than he was about keeping going. And that was the breakthrough where the canter was concerned, because I had spent quite a long time previous to that trying to change his balance in canter. And he was just too wedded to going fast. He's quite a powerful horse as well. He's got a big old back end. That didn't help him either. If you ever see him, he's got quite odd conformation, even though he's quite a good looking horse. He has got slightly peculiar conformation. And he's got the big old Welsh back end, and then the slightly weak, well, maybe Welsh and PRE middle. We have beady eyes on this one. Get him thinking any minute now I might need to slow down for trot. So that was what I used, and I was constantly feeling for what is going on under the saddle. Do I feel like this horse is keeping me lifted, or do I feel like I'm dropping forwards? And for me, there were some really helpful indicators, like this thing of my lower legs starting to flap out, and that was because my pelvis was dropping down. So those are the indicators of some of the indicators of better balance are slower rhythm in walk, and in his case in trot, But very often people in trot are riding horses too slowly, particularly if they're a slower minded horse, which is another indicator of balance, of a balance issue, but in a slightly different way. So it does depend a bit on your horse. But most of us are riding the walk too fast and the trot too slowly. In Fuego's case, all the gaits were too fast. Walk, trot and canter were all too fast. And trot and canter were really leaning on my hands. In all cases, you could hear his front feet from Somerset. The rhythm was extremely quick. I was being pulled on and pulled down and out of the saddle. And he was doing things like pacing in walk and changing leads in canter. So some of the indicators that he is now in a better balance is that he is now taking Mouse's footsteps in walk most of the time. Sometimes it goes tits up, as these things do, but most of the time now, his footsteps are light. Most of the time, and it does, when he gets worried about things, you can hear the rhythm getting quicker again, but most of the time now, he is in a true 4-beat walk, not a kind of a running walk like he was in before. Most of the time now, in trots, which is his hardest gait, it's the one he finds most tricky, he stays in a nice rhythm, and you are able to ask him to come higher, and that doesn't cause him to do that thing of creating a short top line. He doesn't just lift his head, he actually lifts the whole of his front, and then extend his neck, and he doesn't end up zooming around at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So he's able to make those two balance changes, not extremely yet. He's able to come a bit higher and not invert. And he's able to go a bit longer and not run. And in canter, he is able to stay in a canter that doesn't give me face ache from going so fast and that isn't pulling me out of the saddle. The next things to improve with regards to his balance are downwards transitions. Those are the trickiest things for him. And that may be that we reach a wall with that because he has got pathologies, he has got things going on. But some of the big things I've noticed is he no longer looks like a washing line. There's more work to do. He's still got a bit of a dip in front of his withers. He's never going to have, maybe he will, but he's never going to have the strongest back in the world. But he looks markedly different now. He's much smoother along his top line. And the last time my foot trimmer came, she said, his feet are much better. And I didn't say anything to her beforehand. So his body is also demonstrating that he is in a slightly better balance. So I hope that the big place to start is the walk for all of us. So Tracy's saying, what are the indicators of problems with downwards transitions? He would like to invert in the downwards transition still. So he'd like to drop the base of his neck and lift his head through the downwards transition. He would get tense and run a little bit through the downwards transition. And that's potentially the place that he either gets a bit strong again or slams on the brakes. He just finds it hard to do it smoothly. There's a break in it still because it's hard. Downwards transitions are much harder than upwards transitions because they are a challenge to balance. That's where you really see the front to back balance being played out, is in a downwards transition, because they have to slow down and they have to slightly take weight to the hind end. And that can be the place where we see there is still a bit of a challenge with balance and posture, where those things come together. How did you help him with that? Well, like I said, Flynn, that's still not brilliant. It's better than it was. One way I help him with it is I prepare a lot. So I take a lot of time to make the downwards transition. So I don't go to make the downwards transition if I feel that he's going to drop the base of his neck and invert. I'll say, no, keep going. Actually, if that's what you're going to do, let's not make the downwards transition yet. I try to give him lots of cues. Okay, I'm sitting a little bit, say canter to trot, I'm sitting a little bit to your outside hind leg. I'm just thinking about, and can we slow, but it's still not brilliant. And so that's why Minty's saying, please let us know how you got on with Sylvia. Yeah, I will. I'm really looking forward to seeing her, Minty. It's, as you know, I think she's wonderful. And to be able to take him in this way and say, okay, this is my kind of rehab project. Can you help me? So I will let you know how I get on. And yes, Cheryl, I will video it as long as my Pivo does what it's supposed to do. It's an arsehole in that indoor school. It gets sidetracked by the wall all the time. I don't know why. But if I manage to get it to actually track Fuego and not the dusty boards of the indoor school, then I'll definitely share it. So those are the big things I'm going to her about. Is these downwards transitions aren't great. He's still quite crooked. Can I help him anymore with that? And yeah, just to see what she says, basically. But it has been a game changer. It got to the point where I was actually just thinking, do I just retire this horse and let him turn into a saggy mess in the field? But ultimately, he's clearly going to break down if that's what happens, because that's the path he's headed. And he does need to move because he's metabolically challenged. So just hanging out eating the whole time doesn't do him any favours either. So for him, really noticing the symptoms of a lack of balance and then really focusing on what could help him with balance have been really useful to us. So if you have a horse that is offering any of those things, then they may well be telling you, I am challenged with regards to my front to back balance. And a really useful starting point is just in the walk. Just listen for, does the walk sound like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And does it feel like your horse is carrying you in front? And finally, can you hear their front footsteps from the next county? Camilla is saying, over what time period have you been working on this with Fuego? That's a tricky one to answer. This specifically about balance, I'd say about 2 months. But he knew a lot before that. So he did already know a lot of lateral work. I'd already taught him a lot of lateral work. He did already know transitions, things like that. And he knew changing his balance. Oh, sorry, that's a lie. He knew the aids to raise his front end and extend his front end. He just didn't know how to do it in balance. So the additional add of, right, I'm just going to work on balance. I'm not going to let anybody else ride you because I have to try and sort this out. I think has been for about 2 months, but he was already in work and he did already know some things that I could draw on. Like he did already know Renvers and Travers, for instance, which are things that I've been using. So it's not like I was schooling him from scratch in that time, but I think that's how long we've been focusing on this bit. So anyway, I hope that was useful. And if you have any questions, please put them in the group. We have got one final video for the in-hand pathway that I'll put up tomorrow that is about balance. It's about transitions in hand, which is very much about balance. And yeah, I will do another Facebook Live, which is about how you might use the different lateral exercises to improve balance and why, for Fuego specifically, the Travers Renvers half pass collective has been more useful than shouldering. So thank you, Tracy. I hope we have a safe journey too. And it would be nice to see my friends, and it would be nice to be there in a different capacity, asking for help from somebody that I trust. I'm blessed on that front. So thanks very much, everybody. And fingers crossed my Pivo works and I can share with you what we were doing. Okay, take care. Bye.